in last year, this year actually, no, it was in 2020. Jaime, the CEO of Furia, posted a tweet, mentioned that they were looking for HR professionals for Furia, and I was like,
Great.
huh, that's interesting. That's interesting. Actually, that's the first tip that I would like to share for people that are listening or watching the podcast, to follow people and that are on the board of companies that you admire, even not only on esports, but for, I don't know, beverage, for sports organizations. Follow
Right.
the management, because usually they share those opportunities. It's a good way to connect with them first, but people tends to underestimate the business potential of esports.
Right.
When you talk about Furia, for example, we were the first company to have the Nike sponsorship in the whole world.
Massive.
Nike decided to bet in Furia because they understand that esports is growing and that Furia could represent their brand in esports.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the SportIn Global podcast. And today we're here with Bruno Yamakawa. And Bruno, how are you? How's everything going?
I'm good. I'm good. It's a little bit cold, not cold here compared to Europe, but it's cold in Brazil. But besides that, we're cool. We're cool.
That's great to hear. I mean, like, actually, Norway is pretty good right now. Like, it's
Man, you,
super
you
warm,
just start recording and that,
and we have this
and my cat
super cat
guest
with
star.
us. Who is it? What's the
It's
name?
Yuna, my cat.
Awesome. All right. Well, we have to. It's not the first time we had a pet on our podcast, so
Good,
it's
good.
that's what happens with home office.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's
And
my colleague.
and I guess he was just super excited to be part of the podcast as well.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. She loves esports. She loves those things. So it's natural.
Well, Bruno, thanks for taking the time, and it's gonna be exciting, learning little bit more about your journey, what you're doing at Furia, and some tips that you have, as a HR manager. There's a lot of people out there, listening in right now, and kind of like exciting about, wanting to work in esports, wanting to be part of this growing industry. And like I said, for those of you that are tuning in, make sure to like the video, subscribe as well to the YouTube channel, so you get free tips every week. It's nice, when you're a young student, get some free tips every week from key leaders like Bruno. And Bruno, I just wanted to kind of like start with like knowing a little bit about how your journey in the esport industry began. Just take us like to that passion, that stage that you've been through for wanting to be part of the esport industry.
Yeah, sure. I've been there. When you talk about young students and people looking for tips, I've been there. Before HR, I was already in love for games.
Right.
My first memory as a child was my mom and my sister playing Mega Drive.
Hmm.
I remember the game. I remember the music. That's so crazy. So games are a very important part of my life.
Right.
Here in Brazil, the part that I live, it was really complicated to go out and outside to a kid to play because of
Mm.
it was not safe, and there are a lot of cars and some it
Yeah.
was not a good environment to play outside. So video games were my friends for some time, and not
Yeah.
and I say that in a very happy scenario, because my mom was working, my dad was working, so my only companion were my video games sometimes, besides the time
Mhm.
that I was at school.
Sure.
So for as I mentioned, my first memory was a video game experience with my family, and then I grew in love for this industry.
Yep.
So a lot when I was a kid, I remember saying that I wanted to work with video games. I didn't
Mm.
know how and
Right.
why, but I knew that I wanted that. And at the time, esports was really, really, really different from now. I think the only scenario that existed was like the Counter Strike, the 1.6
Yeah.
version, and StarCraft. I think those were the only scenarios that are trying to do something that is similar from nowadays,
Yeah.
but it was something very decent for me. And then in 2013, in Brazil, we have this championship of League of Legends
Mm. Right.
in the World Trade Center in São Paulo. So it's a
Right.
very important building. Like when they receive a lot of international events and shows, and it's a really important avenue. And then there was a game championship being hosted there, and I was like, what? That's so crazy. And then I realized that the esports scenario was really big. And then I
Mm,
start to watch the tournaments, not only League of Legends but Counter Strike as well.
right.
Anything that was that I could follow, I was watching.
Yeah.
So then this passion for esports became a part of my life. And then I realized, and now more mature, I was already in college. I wanted to understand how I could be part of this scenario with
Right.
working in a game industry and then working for the esports department or working for esport organization. I was trying to find my ways, my path in the esports scenario. But even though at that time the scenario was not that mature, even in North America or Europe, we didn't knew any major company or major brand sponsoring any esports organization.
Yeah.
The prize pool was not that big at the time yet. And
Right.
then things are started growing, and of course I didn't find any opportunity at that time, so I made my career in other industries as an HR professional. And then in last year, this year actually, no, it was in 2020. Jaime, the CEO of Furia, posted a tweet, mentioned that they were looking for HR professionals for Furia, and I was like,
Right.
huh, that's interesting. That's interesting. And actually, that's the
Right.
first tip that I would like to share for people that are listening or watching the podcast, to follow people and that are on the board of companies that you admire, even not only on esports but for, I don't know, beverage, for sports organizations. Follow
Right.
the management, because usually they share those opportunities. It's a good way to connect with them and maybe find an opportunity for you. And that
Right.
was my case. I was following Jaime because first I was a fan of Furia before working for Furia,
Mm,
because they achieve a lot of good stuff as a
yeah.
team in the CSGO scenario and the esports scenario overall. And because Jaime, and that's the second tip that I would like to share, but not for the young students, but for people that are working as a leader in other companies, that to be approachable. I know that it's impossible to reply all the messages, all the DMs, but
Mm,
try to be approachable, because I think that opens a lot of opportunities for you to,
yeah.
I don't know, meet people, to connect with companies. And I think it's a good way to be in social media this way. But
Yeah.
then, going back to the question, I talked with Jaime, and then we had this conversation at Zoom. It was already pandemic times,
Mm,
and then I shared my experience. He was interested, but I was not actually what he was looking for exactly at the moment. My experience is more focused on recruitment, and
right.
at that time he was looking for a more generalistic person for Furia. A person that could do recruitment but could do compensation, benefits,
Right.
talk about legal issues. A
Yeah.
person that, like any other startup, that can solve the
Multitask,
problems.
wear
Exactly,
multiple
exactly.
hats.
Yeah, and my career in HR was more like a specialist path. I
Mm,
was really focused in recruitment, and then after this conversation, for coincidence or not, I got an opportunity at my company to be a business partner. That is basically a role when you support a business team and you support any HR demand from them. So from salaries to recruitment to employer branding to training. So he
right.
has a very intense experience, and then supported me to be here at Furia now. 1 year later, he approached me. He was like, Bruno, you're still interested to join Furia? How's your moment? Can we talk? I was like, sure, let's talk.
Yeah.
I was
Yes, of course.
I was, yes, of course, by inside, but outside I was like, yeah, sure, playing, trying to be hard, but
Of
inside I was
course.
like, oh my god, I want to join food, of course,
Yeah.
for sure. And then I'm here, so that's a
Awesome.
little bit of my story.
No, but I mean, like, yeah, I think it's always interesting when it comes to esports too, though. It's sort of like because you're talking about Twitter, right? And I feel like
Yeah,
I don't even get it. Like, why is the esports community just so focused on Twitter? Like that's
yeah.
always baffled me so much. Like how that became like the platform that the esport community and all this stuff is working. Like
I'm not a social media specialist,
yeah,
but from what I heard from our social media specialists, is that Twitter it's a very organic social media. So, for example, in Instagram, you have to it's easier to connect through via Twitter. In Instagram, you can like a photo, you can send a DM, but in Twitter, everything's open, and then you can see when, for example, Footy is playing, you can see all the fan base of Footy cheering for you and sending memes and
Mm,
sending good energy for your team, and then you can see the other team that is playing against you doing the same
right.
thing, and then the fan
Yeah,
base conflicts, but it's
right.
like no, foot is better than you, and then the other
Yeah.
team
Yeah,
responds.
because
So
of the
I think,
retweets and all this stuff, right?
yeah,
Like,
exactly. It's a very
mhm.
organic social media. So I think that's not only esports, but it's sports as well. I think
Yeah,
here in Brazil, actually, the clubs from soccer mostly they are growing really fast in Twitter, because people from the traditional sports are also discovering Twitter, and they say, man, I can I can, make fun from my of my friend that cheers for the team Twitter, so
right.
I'm going to do that. And Facebook in Brazil is in a downgrade at the moment, so I think
Yeah.
Twitter is a good replacement for that.
Well, I think it's interesting how you say about being approachable, right? And I feel like, especially on Twitter too, I feel like even
Hmm.
brands are way more like, responding to you, or like
Yeah,
being more like, how can I say, like, more open and approachable to like whomever, which is always very fascinating. Like
yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar, but like I don't want to go too much out of this and out of our initial
No
conversation,
worries, but,
but
that's a good
but
point.
I don't know if you're familiar with like the Twitter account of Rome, like the football club in
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
so they actually ended up being quite famous on Twitter because their their moderator or whoever is creating or controlling their account, the
yeah,
Rome English account, like they just went everywhere, and they created this enormous hype, for their brand on Twitter, which was like crazy, and
yeah.
it's very mind baffling, like how they're able to do that. And we're actually very proud as Sporting Global that we're being followed by Rome
Nice,
English account.
congratulations.
So
Yeah, yeah.
so that's always cool.
Congrats.
But yeah, it's a fun story, and but it
Yeah.
always caught my attention of like, why is Twitter the like preferred channel for esports and like streamers and stuff? But I think it makes a lot of sense what you talked about right there, and we might have to talk with the social media at Furia as well to dig a little bit
Yeah.
deeper into that on
No,
the
he's an amazing person. I can send his contact later. And also something that I just had an insight just to finish this topic
yeah,
is because different from traditional sports, we don't have many presential events that the fans can go there and
yeah,
cheer for the team face to face. So Twitter, it's kind of a virtual stadium for them.
right. And it's very like live engaging right in there.
Yeah,
Makes
exactly.
makes a lot of sense. But let's dive a little bit into like your passion, I guess, for HR and recruiting, because I mean, like, obviously, we learned how your passion for gaming came to life,
Yeah.
but why HR? Why recruiting? What is it about that you wanted to
Yeah.
explore?
Actually, it's connected to gaming because as an animation, I wanted to work with video games, but
Yeah,
there's not that many opportunities at the time. So I tried to find myself a career that could bring those same emotions that I had playing video games.
mm,
And one of my favorite genres in video gaming is management. It's kind
yeah,
of ironic, like those simulators and
right,
management games and
yeah,
RPGs as well. And part of those games is scouting and recruiting uh,
yeah,
characters for your team.
right,
So
right,
basically, it's the same thing that I did for a lot of time.
yeah,
Trying instead of, I don't know, searching for the best Pokemon or for the best mage for my team, I was searching for the best software engineer, for the best key manager account for those departments. So in essential, it's the same thing, it's the same
yeah,
experience. So when I find that specific player that is perfect for the team, I was like, yes, I got that player. And it's the same energy when I send an offer, when someone that is really good on the market joined the companies I was recruiting for. So it's
awesome.
actually connects to gaming as well. This
That's
passion for HR.
I never thought about that, but I love that
Yeah,
analogy. How you just connecting that dots, and like more importantly as well, that you get that same feeling as like, oh, I'm actually searching
yeah,
and finding the best possible person for the job in the organization.
yeah,
That's fantastic. And I guess like, so obviously, as you mentioned, you were working for some several tech companies before
hmm
going to Furia, and now kind of like working in esports. Like, what has sort of like been the biggest difference that you've been seeing transitioning into esports in terms of recruitment? Because I guess like it's a different kind of industry.
yeah, definitely. They are very different. I think the demands of each industry is very different. For example, I think globally there was this boom of technology.
Mm.
Every company need a software engineer, need a tech leader, a CTO to support the business demands,
Right.
because a lot of things changing from this last decade.
Yeah.
So it was really hard to compete in this scenario, you know. So for example, if you're working for a banking company, when you hire a tech engineer, he doesn't need to know banking. He can learn banking as soon he's joined the company or in the onboard of the company. He needs to learn how to. He needs to know how to code. He needs to know how to make a good product. That's the competence they're looking for.
Right.
Not to. I'm not saying that those companies do not look for cultural values, for soft skills, but in the end, they need to make the business happen,
Yeah. Yeah.
because you have a lot of other departments and a lot of people there that is passion for the culture of the bank, of the, I don't know, other industry that you're working for. In esports, for being something new, a lot of people doesn't even have an idea of what esport company does. So
Mm.
that's the first the first thing that is complicated for esports. Of course, there are a lot of people that are passion of about esports. They love esports. They love Furia or the or any other esports organization that you're
Yeah.
recruiting for.
Sure.
But when you talk for more traditional positions like I don't know, every company need a finance manager or a
Right.
CFO or a head of legal,
Yeah.
or someone to be your public relations manager. You know, those more
Mm.
traditional roles for any company. And usually those people that are more senior, they have their mid 20s, mid 40s, and they're not connected to esports.
Mm.
So you need to explain that that's not it's very serious. For example, the introduction that you gave to the podcast, people doesn't know that there's a lot of money around esports scenario, the
Right.
esports industry. People usually tends to look for to see the fun, the passion about the scenario, that is
Mhm.
really important for us, of course, but people tends to underestimate the business potential of esports. You know,
Right.
when you talk about Furia, for example, we were the first company to have the Nike sponsorship in the whole world. You know,
Massive.
Nike decided to bet in Furia because they understand that esports is growing and that Furia could represent their brand in esports.
Right.
We have now Santander as a sponsor for Furia. It's like a European bank that is
Yeah.
investing in esports. So people
Massive
need.
bank, it's
Exactly, exactly. So no, nowadays is not that hard to, you know, explain that esports is a serious business
yeah.
as well. But sometimes you have these struggles, you know. And when you talk when you're representing a bank, industry that is more traditional, people knows that it's serious. But then
Right.
sometimes in esports you have this, you know, no, it's not a game. It's not for fun. We actually have a business plan. We have
Right.
investors. We have sponsors. It's
Right.
actually a it's a normal company, but our business model is related to esports. That's the only difference.
Yeah. And I guess, like, it's been changing so fast, and
Yeah,
growing so fast that
yeah,
it's like, unless you're in that bubble, you kind of like, you're not aware, right? And I
yeah,
guess, like, even for sports, in like the general sport industry too, was sort of like, okay, what is this esport thing, like, even they were
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah,
is this even going to be like a legit thing,
yeah.
and then you start like digging in there and realizing, well, there's a lot of potential, and there's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of potential for collaborations, and a lot of and you saw like how professional football teams and other teams were like, okay, we're creating our esport branch, and the esport team
Yeah,
out of this too. So it's like, it's been a very fast moving industry, and I guess, like, just for you as well, like, just being part of the team for since last year, I guess, like, a lot has happened just even in that year. And I
yeah,
guess, like, how is sort of like, what have you seen, like, especially during the pandemic, though, I guess, because the esport industry kind of like were one of the ones that were able to kind of like continuously growing. Of course, it had to change a little bit, but at the same time,
yeah,
you could kind of like still compete, which was, I
yeah,
guess, the most important thing. How has that sort of like been for you, and being part of that?
yeah. It's very crazy because before joining Furia, I was working for a beverage company,
Mm.
and basically, you know, bars, restaurants, events that are were really important for the revenue of the company. They just they couldn't they couldn't happen anymore. Borders
Right.
were closed, shows, events were canceled. So
Yeah.
it was a really impact for the company, not only about selling products, but also for sponsorships, partnerships. Those companies, they have different ways of acquiring revenue,
Right.
and it was like crazy. People were
Yeah.
talking about how we could be more efficient, how we could be more digital, how we could get clients through platforms, through apps. There was this major discussion about how we could be more digital. And when I
Mm.
came to Furia, they were like, "We're already digital."
Yeah.
Most part of our audience is
Right.
watching through Twitch, watching through YouTube,
Yeah.
following us through Twitter, as we discussed.
Yeah.
So basically, the discussion that we have here is like, okay, how we can grow faster during the pandemic. Of
Mm.
course, we missed the events. Actually, Furia is going to play a presidential event after 1 year and a half uh, uh, of pauses in those championships.
Yeah.
They're playing in Cologne. So,
Nice.
but still, yeah, but still, with I don't think they're going to receive any audience. It's only the teams
Sure.
playing.
Yeah. Yeah.
We had our Rainbow Six team playing the World Championship, and it was the same structure. Only the teams, only the
Right.
players,
Yeah.
not just the production for the streaming. So
Sure.
things are changing slowly when you talk about events, but in terms of business, it was really crazy for esports. And I think it was, of course, we had impacts because people had to work from remotely.
Yep.
There are some things that actually happens face to face when you talk about commercial meetings and those stuff. But
Right.
in the end, when you see the numbers, Forbes made a report in December of 2020 showing the top 10 companies of esports in terms of valuation, and most of them, they didn't grow, but they didn't actually lose valuation.
Right.
When you compare to other industries that a lot of
Yeah.
companies had an impact of revenue and everything, esports was stable in this
Yeah.
crazy year. So I
Right.
think it's a good sign when you talk about the industry overall. And for food, it was the same thing. I think we started 2021 with, I don't know, uh, I don't remember the exact number. Let's say our numbers of fans in social media double in 4 or 5 months,
Wow.
because people need to follow our social media to follow the
Right. Yeah.
team
Because they
because
couldn't
everything's
attend the
online.
events
Yeah,
and yeah.
yeah, exactly. So it was really crazy. So it was a very major shift of mindset, when I was a company that was trying to understand how they could make the process more digital, and then joining a company that is already digital.
Yeah.
We have our struggles, of course. We're not
Yeah.
saying that everything is easy, but
Yeah.
definitely it was a more soft impact for us than the other industries,
Right,
for
and that
sure.
kind of explains why the esport industry kind of like kept going, kind of like as
Yeah,
normal because they were already
yeah,
in the places where it didn't change much besides like the people attending the physical events and
yeah.
competitions, but in most cases that was just the major championships and the finals. So besides that, it was kind of like, okay, well, we're still streaming, digitally. We're still like
Exactly.
having our communication digitally, and then that
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense. And I want us to like, go a little bit into your recruitment head, and like
Okay.
you're sitting down and going back to evaluating all these people and candidates, and I guess like what are some of the key mistakes that you see for people when applying? Because obviously, there's a lot of young people, that wants to get into different kind of jobs and
Hmm.
roles, of course, and then we want to help them out a little bit, like giving
Yeah.
them some tips and provide them. So
Sure.
from your side, what are some of the key mistakes that you've seen? And I guess like what are some of the general tips that you have on ways they can improve?
Yeah. When talk about young students, people that are trying, they don't have a lot of experience yet. I think the major mistakes that they don't know how to sell themselves.
Mm,
I know that sell is a really harsh word,
yeah,
but in the end, that's it. You have to sell yourself to any company to browse
100%.
the interest for, have an interview, to have an opportunity.
Yeah,
But I think sell is harsh. Let's say branding. People
yeah,
have some issues to brand themselves in the market,
right.
because, for example, I receive a lot of message from different students from different universities, from different degrees, asking if they can join Furia or how they can join Furia. And I was like, listen, before asking you to join Furia, you need to offer me something,
Right.
offer
Clear
me a
value.
skill. Exactly, exactly. And that's where I see where some students shines compared to others. They're, let's see, I think last month we have an internship recruitment process for a spot here in the legal team,
Hmm.
and we had people that were just legal students that weren't their first internship, and they say, "Oh, I'm really I'm a hard worker. I don't know. I have those cars. I have those projects. Please hire me." And then we have those applications that were like, "I'm a good student. I'm hard worker, but I have this project here that I did on my first semester. That was a study about esports in Brazil. I have this
Right.
project here that supports." We had this group discussion in university that we discussed cases from companies, and I brought this case from that company in Brazil about that case in esports. So in the end, we know it's complicated because we know that it's hard to have your first experience because companies tends to ask about your previous experience, but you don't have any experience because you're looking for
Yeah.
this paradox. But in the end, it's how you can make a portfolio of your profile and your how your potential in the end,
Yeah.
because I can see at least show me interest in the
Yeah.
position in the
Right.
company.
Right.
And also that's another mistake, people that just doesn't study the company. And you don't need to go deep. Of course, if you go deep, that's a very interesting thing to do. But if you're a student, just do the basic. Search for the history of the company, when it
Mhm.
was created, what's the business model.
Yeah.
If it's an esport company, what are the major sponsors, the teams. For a
Right.
traditional company, try to see financial reports. I don't know, just do the basic,
Yeah.
because that's something that a lot of young students tends to miss.
Right.
And anytime that a student has this approach with me, I say, okay, even though that I don't have the opportunity for this person at the moment, I'm going to remember him, because he
Mm.
caught my attention.
Right.
Because for me, that's potential. People tends to say that talent and potential is something very difficult to see, but for me, it's very clear. Basically, if the person try to do anything that is go the extra mile,
Mm.
it shows
Yeah.
me potential. So I think it's simple, but it's hard because
Yeah.
you're joining a market that is very aggressive nowadays because we have the pandemic and everything. But for young students, just try to do your best. Try to study the companies. uh, uh, Try to use the university for you. A lot of universities have had those programs for students that they can have mock cases, they can have discussion panels, they can
Right.
approach your teachers. Try to have projects that support you in an interview or even in your professional life. I think university is a good way to acquire experience that is not professional, but it still are very important experience for your resume.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, like, it just comes down to that interest, right? And that
Yeah.
passion and showcasing that. And then, we talk a lot about like, how do you separate yourself? And I mean, like, you're talking about branding. I mean, like, we talk about sales and branding and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, at the end of the day, like, learning how to sell yourself, and like, in everything you do, like, if you're doing like asking for an interview, if you're asking for like just a conversation with somebody, like, that's sales, like at the end of
Exactly.
the day, that's branding. And I think, like, as you said, there's like, how do you showcase that, okay, I want to be part of this industry? And of course, like, the basic stuff, as you said, like, know the company,
Yeah.
understand what they do, because like, as a company as well, and as you're talking about, like, you will ask them, okay, what do we do, like,
Hmm.
what do you know about us, and if you don't know
Yeah.
anything about them, like, how do you expect to be working there, so it's
Yeah, and I remember a story of I think it was a marketing director of a really important agency in Brazil,
yeah.
saying that he got his first experience, his first job, saying that he had a band, and then the company was like, okay, but why having a band is good for our company? And I was explaining, no, because as a band manager, when you create a band, you have to be your own manager, you have to create your brand, you
Mm.
have to approach bars and pubs to get an opportunity to play
Right.
in those venues, and then you have to be your financial manager because you have to manage the budget of the band to
Right.
use for studios, for transport and everything. And then explain, it's not the the experience itself, but how you can make those experiences valid for your professional life. So
Yeah,
even
relating it.
it's a personal life experience, like having a band, it still counts for the interview, it still counts for your resume. It's just how you can how you build the storyline for the
Right.
opportunity.
I mean, like, yeah, and if there's something about like learning from the esports industry, is all those streamers and their ability to create a good storyline. You know,
Yeah,
like
exactly.
that's your inspiration right there for everyone that are listening. And I guess like if you want to look a little bit more into, you know, what exactly is important for Furia though esports as a team when you guys are looking to recruit new people? What are some of the things that grabs your attention like that is very important for Furia?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Here in Brazil, even though that we're growing really fast, I think the scenario overall is still a little bit amateur. And when I say amateur, it's not saying that we are playing here, but amateur in the terms of like traditional sports. I can imagine that football, basketball, those scenarios suffer in those first years. Like 100 years ago, we didn't know that those clubs that are just playing tournaments will become major brands and have multi-millionaire revenues.
Right.
And I think same for esports, even though they were growing faster than probably those sports growth in 1 year, 100 years late before. So a lot of people here in Brazil still see esports as something just to have fun and something to have this connection with passion.
Sure.
Again, this is really important for Furia. We really need people that have this passion.
Yep.
Even though you're not a fan of esports, you have this passion of things happening. You have to be passionate about something that is connected to your work. But at the
Right.
same time, we're looking for people that can make the right calls, the right decisions with good experience.
Mm.
So that's basically to find this fit with people that had the technical capacities of the position and has this passion of esports, a passion of growth, passion of challenges, to have this DNA of Furia that we say to ourselves here in the meetings.
Right.
So I think that's the major thing that we're looking for anyone that applies to Furia, that the person has this passion for challenges or for esports
Yep.
and still has the technical capabilities of making this happen for us.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, like, I wanted to touch a little bit onto the community side as well, though, of esports, and I guess like for Furia too, because as we talked about earlier with social media and like
Yeah.
staying so close to the fans, I felt as well like now like as we are more and more into the esports world, it's a very family community, even like with the partners, with the sponsors, like
Yeah.
with the brands, like how does that sort of like play into the part of Furia, and I guess like also for your recruitment?
No, definitely. I think community played a major part here for Furia. As we mentioned, we try to have this global approach because we
Yeah,
play global events and everything. But the Brazilian fans, they are really passionate, and,
yeah,
and that's really good for us and for any other esports that is working in Brazil. I think that's the main reason that companies from Europe or North America have Brazil operations. So we have Team Liquid, we have FaZe, we have TSM, we have teams that are investing in Brazil because they know the potential of the Brazilian fan base,
right,
and that applies to us definitely. I think again when I mention about being approachable, I think that's the major difference between sports and esports. Of course there are some players in traditional sports that are having this approach,
yeah,
open streams, talking with fans and everything.
yeah,
But I think the major difference between esports and sports, it's, for example, let's take Neymar as an example because
right.
he's a major figure in
Everyone
Brazil.
knows Neymar,
Yeah, yeah.
more or less.
It's impossible. It's basically impossible for me to play a football match against Neymar or
Yeah,
with Neymar. It's impossible. But when
sure,
we talk about esports,
right.
it's not impossible to have a match with the top one player in the world of a game or the top one team that is at the moment, because basically if you're playing in the same server, you can find this person. Basically you
Yeah,
just have to be on the same rank. That's it. You
right.
can have a match against Neymar, against Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo of esports.
Yeah,
I'm not trying to broader romantic view. It's the reality. There are a lot of videos that I played against this player. I
yeah,
had that player joined my team for that match. So we have a lot of this content on YouTube. So I think that that creates the star line that esports, it's something that anyone can do,
Mm,
different from traditional sports. Because they, of course, in traditional, in esports we have this, there are some talent attributes for players, there are also financial attributes because you have to have a computer or have a mobile phone.
yeah,
But in the end, it's almost possible for anyone to be a professional esport player. When you talk about volleyball, for example, I cannot play volleyball in a professional level. I have my height doesn't allow it. Or for the
right.
same thing for
I mean, like you
basketball.
can, but it wouldn't work very well.
Yeah, I could be a libero in volleyball, but basketball will be impossible for me.
Yeah, yeah,
So in sport, that's you can be yellow, black, white. You can be man, a woman. You can be straight, gay,
yeah.
bisexual. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You just have
Right,
to be good at the server. So I think that's why the community is so passionate about it and has this connection, true connection with the players. It's
right.
different. It's different when you talk about traditional sports. When you see, let's say, Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, they are like gods, idols. They are almost un, untouchable. But here in esports, when I see a player interacting with, when I see a fan interacting with our players,
Yeah,
it's like they're friends. They have a
right.
different relation. I'm like, no, I know you. We play together, or when they're streaming, they have this conversation on the chat of the stream.
Yeah,
They the connections are different. Of course, they're
right.
idols. They're people that are
Sure.
legends in esports, but still it's different. It's different when you compare to the legends of the traditional sports.
Yeah, I mean, like, I completely agree, and it's a really valid point because you get a lot closer to, I guess, like the stars of the esport world. You know, like suddenly, like you have that direct link, and as you said, maybe even being able to play with them if you're in the same server, or even like joining them on the same team. So it's like it creates a lot more closer relationship to the athletes, and as you said,
Exactly.
like that open policy. And I guess like it's just that warmness and then approachable that is also very important, I guess, for the streamers and for the players as well to have and learn. I guess like when you're
Exactly.
representing a professional team as well, like Furia, is that okay? Well, of course you're representing Furia, but you're also building your brand, and you sort of like building a community not only for yourself but for that
Exactly.
brand as well. And I guess that's a very key point.
Yeah, and just to connect with the question with recruitment, this reflects a recruitment very clear for me, because different from other companies where I had to invest budget, I have to invest in media to have my posts and have my job opportunities uh, to be announced in different platforms.
Mhm.
I didn't have to spend any money with recruiting in Furia at the moment.
Right.
Basically, if I post something on Twitter, the fans of Furia, they support the team for anything. It could
Right.
be a match day, or it could be just a recruitment post, and they were
Right.
like, no, let's try to find this person for Furia, and they tag their friends, and then
Yeah.
it's very organic. So everything, it's supported by the community. So the community plays a major role for Furia in any aspect, in HR, in financial, in
Yeah.
legal, commercial. It's really good to have this passion by supporting you. I didn't had this experience in any other company, and I worked for cool companies,
Right.
uh,
Right.
and it's the first time that I have this kind of approach in recruitment, that people are actually helping me to find people, so in a
Right.
very
No, but
organic
I
way.
guess like it comes down to the whole your relationship to the organization, right? And kind of like
Yeah,
how close you are to them, because I
yeah,
guess like you're talking about your other cool companies, which is more, I guess, corporate, and then you
yeah,
have like that corporate culture, and that's always like a challenge when you kind of like become very big. And I guess like the esport industry, although they're still kind of small, I guess, in a sense, like
yeah,
compared to like major teams and everything,
definitely.
they're still growing quite fast, and there's increasingly becoming I wouldn't say corporate, but a big company, and hence
Yeah,
that's going to be interesting as well. Like, how do you maintain that, right? So you don't lose that community feeling. And I guess that's a very important part of your job too, in a sense
yeah,
of keeping
exactly.
that. But if we want to sort of like, I guess, wrap this all up in like the final question, and provide them with like some, I guess, final tips, for
Hmm.
any student out there that just wants to get their foot in the esport industry, like where do you begin? How do you start? And yeah, what final tips do you have for them?
Sure. I think that the question that you had to make for yourself, and not only for the students that are looking for an opportunity in the esports industry, is try to understand what are the things, or the content, or I don't know. Try to understand what are the things that brings your passion out of you, because
Yeah,
that's going to be your backbone when you talk about professional life. I know it's a tricky question, because it's hard to understand what are things that make you feel happy as a professional when you're still studying.
yeah,
But try to be go to events, talk with professionals, talk to your teachers, try to see the classes as a taste of the professional life, to understand if this kind of class is interesting for me. And
yeah,
then when you realize what kind of segment or what kind of specialization you're going to look to work for and study for, then try to connect that with esports. As I mentioned in the example of the legal students, don't be the best legal student as possible, and try to connect that with esports. So try to create a group of discussion about legal cases in esports, or if you're an engineer, try to discuss case about apps in sports scenario. Try to build your own app as a student. Try to create your portfolio that is connected with your academic background, and
mm,
then try to make your own way to esports. Definitely something that really caught my attention is people that had their thesis, their master thesis about esports. They had a project that
right,
was sponsored by a teacher, or they're made by a group of students with esports. You have a lot of things to explore in university that can be your portfolio for the professional market. And even though that you don't have this first opportunity in esports, definitely other companies from other industry are going to have a good view about those projects, because in the end is doing something to showcase for the world. And
yeah,
of course, eventually you're going to find your own way to esports, just like I did. I never thought that I was going to be a HR manager that soon, and I would never imagine that I could be an HR manager at an esports company that soon, and that happened. But at
very
the
good.
same time, I was working my way through,
Yeah,
working for tech companies, working for beverage companies, because I know that those experiences are really, really important for any company. So that's another tip that I give to students. Try to understand what are the skills that companies are looking for. Don't study something for the money. That's not my point. But try to understand how you can be more sexy for companies. There's some trends that you can understand for any profession, for any industry, and try to understand how you can be part of that trend. And if that trend is it's interesting for you as well, as I mentioned, you have to be interested for that to be sustainable. Because if you're going to do only for the money, you're going to burn out really soon. So I know that, because I know some cases. So yeah, it's I know that it's a little bit romantic, but in the end, I think that's very true. Try to find something that brought your passion. Try to connect that with the thing that you want to work for. If it's e-sport, try to connect with e-sport. If it's traditional sports, try to connect with traditional sport. If it's banking, try to connect with banking.
yeah,
And then someday, eventually, you're going to have an opportunity that is going to be really good for you. So in the meantime, just try your best. Try to get the best of the opportunities that you're going to be offered, and in the end, you're going to find yourself in a really good position, in a really good company. And I hope that this advice is going to support you guys and help any young student that is watching or listening this the podcast.
well, I'm 100% sure it will. And if there's one thing we can finalize for sure, is that both esports and sport is romantic. It's
Yeah,
something.
definitely. Yeah.
Well, Bruno, I would like to thank you, so much for taking the time, for sharing your tips and advice with all of us. And if you have been able to stay through here throughout the entire episode, you've been getting some key tips and insights. If you haven't already, make sure to like the video, subscribe as well. We really appreciate that. And we will talking with key leaders every week representing sports, esports, the entire global industry. So whomever is out there, will you'll get a lot of insights and tips that will help you guide you, because that's our philosophy at SportIn Global. We want you to find people and relate to stories that will help you, inspire you, and motivate you to find your passion and succeed in the industry. So with that, Bruno, thank you once again. And I got to finish up with some Norwegian though. So you got to learn some Norwegian from us.
Okay, let's go.
Right. So we always finish every video with "Vi snakkes," which means "see you later" in Norwegian. So.
Oh, okay. Vi snakkes, is that correct?
Vi snakkes, yeah.
Vi snakkes.
There you go. Perfect, Bruno.
Thank you so much, guys. Thanks so much, Ole. It was a pleasure.